No Greater Love by Sidney J. Bounds. Originally published in the July 1970 issue of Vision of Tomorrow magazine. Republished in a 1973 anthology entitled Flight on Titan. Read by Darrell T. Smith II for my channel Quasar Spectra. No Greater Love. Detectors operating. Rocky mass at extreme range. Either a small planet or a large asteroid. You call that a planetoid, Joe? Call it anything you like, Joe Winton growled. But check it out. Naturally. The compact Star Scout altered course slightly in the great gulf of interstellar space. Exhaust jets flared briefly, pinpointing the ship against black emptiness as it lifted above optimum cruising speed and homed on the still invisible planetoid. Presently, running check completed. First analysis indicates probable geocrystal content. Joe sat up sharply in his acceleration cocoon. He took a long breath, gray eyes reflecting a new alertness. About time, too. This isn't a pleasure jaunt. We've got a living to earn. How probable, B? Better than 60%. Orbit and routine survey, Joe ordered, swinging down from the cocoon. He made himself a meal from pre-packed tubes of meat and veg and apple pie, adding scalding water to coffee and cream. It looked as though he would be doing heavy work before long, and he always worked better on a full stomach. He thought about geocrystal as he ate, the most valuable property so far discovered in space. A small crystal would retail on Fraser Darling, the nearest point of Terran civilization, for 1,000 credits. A big load would set him up for life. It was geocrystal that made a one-man prospecting ship an economic possibility. One man and B. Decelerating, B notified. Joe climbed back into his cocoon, snuggled down. Time passed until the Star Scout orbited. He remained silent while B probed with a battery of spy waves. Rock formation extensively honeycombed. Now definite trace of geocrystal. Thin atmosphere with low oxygen content. Get down there, Joe ordered promptly. The ship pulled out of orbit and entered approach trajectory. Joe sensed they were hovering before he felt the vibration of touchdown. He rose and padded across to an observation window, stared out at barren rockscape. The horizon had visible curvature. Just above it, stars lost their color and began to twinkle, the only positive indication of an atmosphere. He saw the dark mouths of pits, scores of them, burrows that tunneled into a scarred and cratered surface. The planetoid was one enormous honeycomb. He felt glad he hadn't tried to set down on manual. B chanted, "You will need a pressure suit and oxygen sac, prospector's kit, which includes geocrystal indicator, pickaxe, sample box." "I know all that. Stop nagging like an old woman. We're not married yet." "Of course not. That would be impossible, as I am not a human female. B stands for bioelectrical analog. I am a biological computer grown from brain cells. The fact that these were human brain cells in no way..." "Belt up," Joe snarled. "Only trying to be helpful." "Too damned helpful." After a pause, B asked, "Is that possible?" "Too right it is." Joe zipped on a lightweight pressure suit and attached an oxygen sac. Feeding oxygen directly into his bloodstream, it gave him a 12-hour life outside the ship. He hooked a laser to his belt. Not that he expected trouble. It was a normal precaution. He took a hand torch and, finally, the crystal indicator. He checked his radio link with B, who commented, "I sometimes think I would be of more use mobile. Then I could go with you." Joe shuddered at the thought. He'd never get away from her then. Yak, 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 like a woman all the time. He stepped through the lock. Outside, even under light gravity, the surface crunched under his boots and he moved warily. Brittle, porous stuff. He took a close look at the Star Scout's landing gear. The pads had spread, but had still sunk to a depth of several inches. He began circling, watching his indicator. Not a trace of crystal. He widened his circuit. Where was the probability that geocrystal is below surface? B informed over his headset. Joe cursed. You could have mentioned that sooner. He headed across the bleak, gray rockscape for the nearest pit. One opening was as good as another. He'd explored too many chunks of rock to start getting fussy now. He flashed his torch into the dark mouth. An irregular tunnel sloped away. He entered cautiously, placing his feet with care before transferring his weight. The floor seemed safe enough, but one fall down here and he'd had it. The slope continued, and as he went deeper, he watched the dial of his indicator. The needle flickered. There was geocrystal, but deeper yet. He went far enough to be satisfied that it was no false alarm, then returned to the ship. It's down there, okay? I told you so, B answered. Now you must shut up. You get on my wick. I give the orders around here. Don't speak until I ask a direct question. Understand? Yes. The pause lengthened into a painful silence. Is that all you have to say? Your orders were... Joe snorted. Damn it, you sound more like a female every day, always arguing. He made himself a snack and swung into his cocoon to rest before starting work in earnest. Relaxing, he turned a benevolent eye on B, a grayish mass of brain cells and nerve fibers swimming in a nutrient solution contained in transparent sac. Incredible. Wonderful, really, he reflected lazily. Damn near human. In his long, isolated spells between worlds, she was his only companion. It was difficult not to think of her as more than a biological computer grown by cloning brain cells. She ran the ship, dealt with all routine matters. Most of all, she was his memory. B never forgot a thing, which perhaps accounted for her most irritating characteristic, a repetition of minute detail. Or was it that she liked the sound of her own voice? Sometimes he was convinced that her original cells had been taken from a female brain. Running the ship, she tended to think she also ran him, that he was there simply as an extension of herself, or that was how it seemed. Good thing she wasn't mobile. And when she got on her hobby horse about how superior she was to the old electronic computers, she became almost unbearable. To be fair, she was superior. It was a wonder the bio boys had taken so long to come up with B. It was so much simpler to grow a computer than assemble all that old-fashioned hardware. His snack digested, he swung his feet to the deck and started towards his pressure suit. Time for work. You will need a fresh oxygen sac, B chanted. Also the prospector's kit, which includes... Skip that, Joe snapped. You are registering annoyance. In your present state of mind, do you think it advisable to go below ground alone? If only to get away from you, yes. Don't forget the pickaxe, sample box. Shut up. Joe grabbed up his hand torch and hurried through the lock. Outside, he made directly for the tunnel he had started to explore when B's voice came over the radio. Forgive me for mentioning it, Joe, but you appear to have left the laser behind. He had, too. Joe halted, cursing, but he wasn't going back to let an overgrown mass of biocells crow over him. The hell with the laser. Shan't need it, he replied curtly and headed down into the burrow. It was a fatal error. Under the planetoid's surface, he moved confidently along the slanting floor, light from his torch illuming porous gray walls. When his indicator began to register, he slowed his pace. He passed the place where he had turned back before and continued down. Other tunnels branched off, a regular maze of them, and he followed the route his indicator suggested. He was truly alone now. Tons of rock effectively cut radio communication. The tunnel opened out into a cavern, and his indicator needle swung wildly across the dial. This was a big load. He lifted his torch. Geocrystal glittered and flashed a billion reflections, dazzling him. The stuff projected in crazy shapes from the floor, like an army of malformed stalagmites. He'd never seen anything like it before. The glitter of the crystal fascinated him, and, still dreaming, he stepped forward, reaching for his hammer. He had to break off a sample, run... Something checked his forward motion. He dropped the hammer as he shifted his torch to shine on the near-invisible obstacle, a single strand of some sticky material. It glistened in the torchlight, stuck to his suit. He drew back to break free and found that another strand touched him. "Soon break this stuff," he thought, and swung both arms vigorously. The strands didn't break, and his arms collected other strands. He struggled, and new strands dropped about him, winding stickily about his arms and legs and body. The harder he struggled, the more tied up he became. He appeared to have blundered into a whole mesh of the stuff. Panic welled up, and as he struggled furiously, he dropped the torch. It rolled across the floor, out of reach. He stopped fighting the web, forced himself to remain calm, and tried to think his way out. If he had the laser now, he'd soon burn himself free. He laughed bitterly. He should have listened to Bee. Bee knew best. He decided he'd have to take one strand at a time. If he couldn't break the stuff, he might be able to wriggle clear. He went at it delicately, succeeding in removing one strand from about his body to have it stick to his hands. Every slight movement he made seemed to direct another strand of the web to him. He was becoming completely imprisoned in the stuff. He had to admit it. He was trapped and could see no way out, except with the laser he didn't have. Time was passing. When his oxygen sac was used up, he would die. He had to think. Thinking got him nowhere, and he struggled again, struggled futilely, shifting one unbreakable strand of the sticky web from one part of him to another. He was becoming tired. He paused, staring at the wealth of crystal glittering in the torchlight. All his. There was movement just beyond the range of his torch, shadowy movement. He couldn't see exactly what it was, and felt glad he couldn't. Again the thought came. A spider's web. It wouldn't be a spider, of course, some alien predator who spun a web to trap food. He hoped the thing choked on him, hoped, too, that his oxygen ran out before it reached him. A voice came out of nowhere. "Joe? I assume you are in trouble. I have had no report from you, and your oxygen sac is now half used." B, of course. Some freak formation on the rock allowed her radio voice to reach him. "If you hear me, Joe, you should try to start back at once. Can you hear me?" "Sure, I hear you," Joe growled. "There's nothing I'd like better than to start back, but can you hear me? Answer, please." Joe's heart sank. The freak formation allowed one-way contact only. Obviously, B couldn't hear him. After a pause, B's voice came again. "I've always said I would be of more use mobile." "This time, I agree with you," Joe muttered. "But there's nothing we can do about that." After that, there was silence. Joe Winton made another desperate effort to free himself before lack of oxygen weakened him. He attacked the sticky strands like a berserker. The web wrapped itself even more tightly around him until, exhausted, He gave up. Time dragged. His ears buzzed. Oxygen failing, he thought dreamily, won't be long now. Her voice again. Joe? I'm coming, Joe. Pure fantasy, of course. He was hearing voices. He was really on the way out. His sight blurred. Crystals danced in the torchlight. He had a numb, sleepy feeling. He stirred weakly in the web that held him upright. Something moved in the shadows beyond the light of his torch, something that crawled steadily nearer. He squinted at it. Whatever it was no spider. Couldn't you wait a bit longer? He shouted, fear rousing him. Couldn't you wait till I passed right out? An answering voice came. Joe? He blinked, shook his head to clear it. His vision improved. Bee? He asked doubtfully. Yes, Joe, it is I. Bee dragged herself over the uneven rock floor towards him. A very different Bee. The mass of gray cells had shrunk, and she appeared to have gained rudimentary limbs. She leaked a trail of nutrient behind her. Slowly, agonizingly slowly, she moved, carrying a metal tube in one limb. The laser lifted slowly, wavered. Concentrated light beamed through the cavern, seared the sticky web which fell from him like a discarded shroud. Oxygen sac, Joe. Joe crawled across the floor, avoiding the remnants of web. He still felt faint. He reached Bee and took the oxygen sac she had brought. It took him 3 attempts to fill it properly, but then he could breathe again and his head cleared rapidly. He stood up. Are you all right, Bee? Not all right, Joe. Her voice sounded old, and the rudimentary limbs were disintegrating. Well, how am I going to get you back to the ship? Not going back, Joe. Too late for me. I had to cannibalize cells to grow limbs. The problem was mobility, you see. My memory contained the full detail on cloning. It was not difficult once I saw the solution, but there was no time to do the job efficiently. Not nearly enough time. Joe stared at her with blurred eyes. Bee was deteriorating fast. She had sacrificed brain cells to grow limbs to come and save him, and there was nothing he could do for her. Movement flickered beyond the torchlight. The predator was moving in, not on him, but on Bee. Frustration gave way to surging anger. At least she could be spared that horror. He grabbed the laser and, in a continuous movement, aimed and thumbed the firing stud. He had a brief, shocking glimpse of multifaceted eyes and champing jaws set in a bloated carapace as he crisped the web spinner. He turned back. Bee? He said softly. There was no reply. Biocells dissolved in a spreading pool of nutrient. He knelt beside her and grasped a crudely grown limb, its extremity so like a human hand. He could not think of anything to say. Hot tears welled down his cheeks. He held it till there was nothing left to hold. You've been listening to pre-1990s speculative fiction readings with a highlight on science fiction by Darrell T. Smith II. Please consider clicking the donation link in the description box. Thank you so much for your time and your imagination.